For those of you who are new to cybersecurity and trying to figure out where to go in cybersecurity since it's such a strange space, this is a video that you need to watch. This is a video where I will be talking about some very specific details that sort of make cybersecurity what it is today, but more importantly, this is information that will help make cybersecurity as a field make more sense. It will help make getting into cybersecurity make more sense, and it will help make everything make more sense around cybersecurity just because the field is so obtuse. So let's go ahead and talk about some very important things that every single person who is trying to get into cybersecurity as a beginner needs to know. And for some of you who are already into cybersecurity, some of this information might be helpful for you as well. Now, since I have dedicated this channel to answering questions that people ask me about cybersecurity, I have gotten a significant amount of questions. And go figure, none of you like to ask the simple questions. So, since none of you like to ask the simple questions, I need to give you some context for how I think and how I approach things so that you also understand how my channel approaches information that I provide to you as viewers. Now, if you're new to my channel, you can also subscribe if you're interested in learning about cybersecurity and figuring out how can you get cybersecurity jobs, what types of jobs are out there, what do people do in the field, anything around cybersecurity jobs, getting into cybersecurity. That's what this channel is all about, so go ahead and ask me. My name is Nathan Riley, and I also go by the nickname of Nato, per my channel Ask Nato. So let's start talking about what exactly is so important that everyone needs to know. Now, one thing that I find very valuable toward figuring out anything in cybersecurity, anything toward getting a job, anything toward much of anything, this is how I operate anyways, which has taken me as far as I've gotten in my career. And it's something that you will also see splattered all over the internet around other big names in engineering and so on. And right now the big name in engineering and technology is Elon Musk. So you've probably heard of first principles. First principle thinking is a philosophical concept around taking the most basic aspects of concepts so that you can then take something obtuse and complicated and bake it down into something that shouldn't be very complicated and shouldn't be overly confusing or confounding. And that has to do with coming up with a first principle. For example, if you need something that's going to crush something, let's say that you're trying to open up a peanut. Well, a peanut has a shell, and you might need to crush that shell so you can get the peanut out. So you probably need something else that's harder than the shell, or something that is capable of crushing the shell with pressure. So a first principle might be that something harder than the peanut shell can crack the peanut shell so that you can open it and get the peanuts out. So if you're thinking to yourself, how can I get the peanuts out of this peanut shell? Think of something harder than the shell in order to probably crack a shell that's pretty hard and probably harder than your fingertips. Of course, if you also add enough pressure to something that's not all too hard, there's another first principle around how might you get the peanut out of the shell. If you apply enough pressure, which your fingertips and hands or however, whatever you want to use, a nut cracker or anything, because there's different tools that people might use to crack a peanut. Who knows? Enough pressure might also crack the peanut shell so that you can eat the peanut. Now, in theory, that sounds incredibly basic and elementary, which is also a very important thing when you're trying to do something really confusing, something really complicated, including getting into one of the most obscure fields in the world, that being cybersecurity. And so in this video, we're going to talk about first principles around cybersecurity and getting into cybersecurity. Why is cybersecurity such a hard field to get into? Why is the concept of cybersecurity so hard to wrap your head around for those of you who do not work in the cybersecurity space and have not spent a whole lot of time digging into cybersecurity? Why does it seem like IT and cybersecurity and computers and people who work with computers, why does it somehow all seem the same? Is this some sort of conspiracy? Is there something nefarious working against people so that no one really knows how to get certain jobs and defining jobs in ways that confuse people so that no one can get anywhere in their careers? What does any of this have to do with anything? Well, let's go ahead and go all the way back to before we even had computers. As a matter of fact, let's go all the way back to before we had light bulbs and other things. So first and foremost, of course, at some point, we came up with electricity. So sometime, I want to say like in the 1800s, but there are different events where people discovered electricity. But in terms of starting to mechanize things, we ended up with steam power and then electrical power, and then we started coming up with electrical generators. And every time society came up with something new, we could suddenly become more productive. And so when Thomas Edison came up with the light bulb, well, he didn't come up with the light bulb, but Thomas Edison is one of the historical superpowers that figured out what needed to be done in order to make light bulbs just a standard household item so that we can just have light, like the lighting that's allowing me to not see anything whenever I am recording these videos because it's blinding. Light. It lets us do things at any time during the day. Well, all of a sudden, people could work at night. We didn't have to have torches and lots of oil, and it was easier for people to read at night and study at night. And so that changed how education works, that changed how manufacturing works, that changed how business works, it changed how the world works. One thing, more usable light than what we had before the light bulb. And then, of course, we came up with things like cars. We keep coming up with these things to help make us astronomically more productive as a society. And every time we come up with something new, society and the world ends up having to come up with ways to keep up with whatever this new thing is. And so coming from being a species that farms and you wake up with the sun and you don't have unlimited oil, so at nighttime if you don't have any oil left or you want to reserve your oil, or it's just dark, you're probably just going to go to bed when it gets dark, and then you're going to wake up with the sun, and then you're going to go out, tend to the crops, take care of whatever you have. If you're in a society where other people take care of the crops, then maybe you're doing school studies and you really don't have the ability to do much else. You can't travel anywhere very quickly unless you have a horse, and horses aren't as fast or convenient as cars, and we didn't have highways, and we didn't have trains at one point. Everything was much more complicated. Everything took significantly more time, and a lot of this was only about 100 years ago. Now, 100 years ago, okay, so we did have machinery. We had steam power. We were starting to have power. A lot of things were starting to happen. But 100 years ago, we weren't capable of being nearly as productive as we are today. Why is any of this important? Because years later, we started coming up with different things. We always want to go and find a new world. So at some point, people found America, and then at some point, we wanted to go on the space race. And whether or not you believe that we went to the moon, that's not the argument. The point is that we always search for new frontiers, and with every new frontier we come up with, we create new technologies to help us make that new frontier conquerable, and we conquer whatever that new frontier is as human beings. This is something that we do. So all of a sudden, the internet is born, and when the internet was born, and I don't want to make this more confusing than it's already going to be, or more overwhelming than it's already going to be, because I'm giving you a lot of information right now, like a ton of information right now, and I get that. So I'm not going to talk about dates and things like that. Like, you can Google some of this if you want to. We don't want to get into the weeds too far. So, frontiers, the internet, new things. new things to conquer. Well, we've more or less conquered the entire world before we even discovered the internet. We've colonized most of the livable world anyways, and now people are talking about colonizing Mars. Already, we haven't even gotten to the point where we're walking around on Mars, and we're already talking about colonizing Mars and talking about how to get there. And Bezos, who started Amazon, is talking about trying to have businesses run in space. I don't even know, but we're always trying to conquer something. And so when the internet came along, now we have something after the space race that we need to conquer. And of course, at first we have very slow connections like dial-up, and I grew up on dial-up. It was so slow to where you might be wanting to see an image that you're waiting to download, so you walk away for 30 minutes and come back and see if it's done. And if your dial-up's fast enough, an image might have loaded and you can look at it, see whatever, I don't know, cats. Everyone looks up cats on the internet. It's like we discovered the internet, now we can look up more cats, and we can upload pictures of our cats. So, we also decided to start figuring out how to run our businesses with the internet, communicate with the internet. And then the next thing we know, we're like, okay, so we have things called telephones. Can we put the internet and things that allow us to use computing powers, can we use that in the palm of our hand? And the telephone eventually evolved into the smartphone, which means that we have connectivity wherever we are, connectivity no matter what we're doing. And whenever you have something new, something exciting, you're going to have people who want to tinker, you're going to have people who want to experiment with stuff, you're going to have people who want to try to break it, or try to fool people, or try to get money out of it. And there's always going to be good people, and there's always going to be bad people. So we're going to get people who are going to say, if everyone's connected to this thing, I bet I could steal things from them. But what can I get? Oh, I can steal information that has to do with financial information, like credit card information, or information that allows me to use their social security card to get myself a bank loan in their name. And all kinds of fraud, things that you can come up with, fool the government, fool everybody, fool random people who are online clicking on banners and getting phished from emails that are fake, that look like they came from some legitimate website. Okay, great. So all of a sudden, it's around the year 2000, and cybersecurity is not an industry. There's no such thing as cybersecurity in 1999. Then the year 2000 comes along, and we're more focused on Y2K. And, the internet crashing and all computers dying and falling apart, and I don't know, meteors falling from the sky, just chaos, and people being like, it's Y2K. All right. I actually thought Y2K was happening for real for a moment there. All right. Now that we survived Y2K, let's get back to what we were talking about. So it's not that cybersecurity didn't exist. Of course, the concept of cybersecurity existed in 1999. But you're more likely to hear people say IT security or information security. And then you would start to hear people talk about InfoSec, and then go figure there's a company now called InfoSec that started like 15 years ago from now, around that time frame, right before the next big event happened with the world and the internet. And that goes back to what we were talking about, those marketing terms, when all of a sudden the hackers are there, we survived Y2K, we have businesses getting breached, all these disasters, and there's so much data that essentially if you wanted to steal information from a company back in 2005, for the most part, there weren't very many advanced methods that anyone had come up with for how to actually stop people from stealing information, because, go figure, this has never been a problem before, and the internet didn't even exist 100 years ago. There was no internet 100 years ago. And now, the internet is escalating and growing more rapidly than we ended up with streets, more rapidly than we ended up with trains and train tracks and anything else throughout history. Everything just keeps speeding up. Everything has been going so fast that we ended up in somewhat of a big data crisis. And that brings us to what I like to call the age of big data. And we are now in the age of data. So we are moving toward companies and organizations having petabytes and exabytes and just, I guess there's yottabytes, and it goes on and on. We have so much data that an individual couldn't dig through even, say, like a company's data manually. And so all of a sudden we start having to come up with ways to leverage machine learning and analytics, and then different tools like SIM tools came along and things that analyze logs automatically, and people started using regular expressions, trying to figure out how we can help make technology more secure, make the internet more secure, make business more secure. Because at the end of the day, everything in cybersecurity, for the most part, goes back to computer chips. So let's go back to IT. What does an IT professional do? They work on infrastructure. They keep infrastructure running. They build the infrastructure. And before there was really like a separation between IT security and cybersecurity and information security and all that nonsense, well, IT professionals are the ones who are working with computer chips, like for the use of internet connectivity before other devices start having computer chips in them. You know, a lamp that just has like a little twisty switch that probably doesn't have a computer chip in it. But now we have RGB lamps and things of that nature, where now lamps have computer chips in them. Your phone has a computer chip in it. Everything is starting to have a computer chip in it if it does a little more than just turn on and off with a little light that doesn't do much of anything. So many things are becoming computerized and connectable to the network, because if you have the ability to compute, and if you're, say, a Wi-Fi microwave and a Wi-Fi stove and Wi-Fi lights in your house, Wi-Fi car, Wi-Fi everything, I don't even know. So since everything is starting to be connectable to the internet just as fast as we practically discovered the internet, well, now we have to try to figure out how to make all of those things secure, because we don't even know what we're doing with the internet yet. The world has no idea how to carve up the internet, and no one agrees on standards completely yet. And so now we start getting all these new regulations, and this is what brings us to our more modern idea of cybersecurity. Now we have national standards across multiple countries trying to do different things. In the UK and Europe, maybe not the UK, Europe, we have GDPR, and GDPR is a European cybersecurity mandate, well, data regulation really, but once again, it has to do with securing IT, which is cybersecurity. Talking about computers have to have privacy rules, and it just gets more and more complicated. And then even health rules for, say, HIPAA in the United States is a compliance mandate to help protect people's personal health information, private information that has to do with individuals. Well, it's illegal to go and sell some patient's cancer information to who knows who, just in general. Like, because we have compliance regulations in different countries, different types of compliance regulations depending on where you live, this is us trying to figure out how to control the internet, and this is us trying to figure out how to maintain that. And who's in the center of helping us figure out how to take control of the internet? Cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is in the center of trying to figure out how in the world are we going to be securing our latest frontier. So we've colonized the whole world. We have started building cities everywhere, and we just keep expanding everything we're doing. We've gone to the moon, and once again, I said this earlier, we're always trying to figure out, like, what's our next frontier. People are talking about space and Mars being a frontier. That's a thing right now. But the frontier that we have right now is the internet. And cybersecurity, per everything I just talked about, is an industry literally born, like, from scratch, from the internet. There might be a few other industries that are born of the internet, but something that's a lot more specific to cybersecurity being an industry born out of the industry, or out of the internet rather. Well, cybersecurity is the industry that is going to probably more or less determine how we manage our current frontier. And because a lot of it's so undefined, it's our modern Wild West, trying to figure out how to stop hackers and these people who are our modern bandits. When we have Capital One getting hacked, and then we have things happening to Sony, and small businesses usually don't survive breaches, and it's just chaos everywhere. These are our modern day bandits. Phishing attacks, these are our modern day bandits. And we are just trying to figure out, how do we stop these people? Because really, like, hackers are far ahead of security on the internet in general, just because they were the ones who made security all of a sudden be required, because they're sitting there pioneering even before cybersecurity professionals come in and are like, oh no, we need to stop this chaos. And so cybersecurity is this never-ending battle that constantly evolves, and it's an industry that just never really stops moving in its current state. Right now, there are about 3 million cybersecurity positions out there, and only about 1 million of them are filled because companies don't know how to find professionals who are qualified for cybersecurity. People who want to get into cybersecurity have no idea how to get hired in cybersecurity, and meanwhile, we just have all this chaos running amok online, and people are, phishing is over 90% of breaches start from phishing attacks alone, and that's like the simplest form of a cyber attack you can get. So anyone who's more advanced than that, they might not be causing the majority of the breaches, but it's a big deal because we don't know how to stop these people unless you're a cybersecurity professional, when it's your job to try to constantly figure out whatever they figured out next and figure out how to communicate with people, where now also we have to teach people how to use the internet as cybersecurity professionals. As cybersecurity professionals, we have to teach people how to handle these regulations, how to improve some of these data regulations. What is privacy? How do we manage privacy? How do we protect privacy? Different things. And it's this long laundry list, on top of the fact that we already don't know how to keep up with the ever-expanding amounts of data on the internet. The internet just basically becomes this larger creature with more and more amounts of data, with more ways for hackers to be obscure and more ways for people to find malicious threats that they stumbled upon by accident. It's like a minefield. It's just chaos. And so cybersecurity is chaos. It's a little bit of chaos. And it's a role where a lot of times management has no idea what's going on, and unless they come from being, say, like an analyst or doing field work of their own. But, executives don't know what's going on because executives generally aren't the technical ones in the first place. A lot of companies don't necessarily have a CISO, and not all CISOs have the same amount of background that helps them fully understand the full gamut of what's going on in the current landscape. So it's a relatively complicated deal, cybersecurity as an industry, but it has a significant amount of opportunity, and that's what cybersecurity has. It has an astronomically massive amount of opportunity for the future. With the development of artificial intelligence, that needs to be secured. That's a thing that's going online. That's a thing that needs to be managed and structured. That's cybersecurity. When it comes down to teaching people to not click on those phishing emails and things of that nature, it may not be a technical job. That's cybersecurity. We're keeping people safe on the internet by teaching them the basics of the basics and then helping encourage them to not be scared to talk about it. Because let's be honest, it can be a scary thing when you're working in an office and you click on the wrong email and you're like, oh no, I got in trouble. I clicked on the wrong email. I'm not going to say anything to my company. And then because people don't feel comfortable talking when they feel like they did something bad, there's a lot of social engineering around that so that we can get conversations going so that not only do people get trained to not do the wrong things at work to cause an entire company to get infected, but how do you make people feel comfortable openly talking about it without feeling ashamed of something that they did and being embarrassed. And just talk to so many people where they're like, oh, I clicked on the wrong email. So then they send out like a private email to some of their favored fellow coworkers and they're like, don't click on that one email if you see it. It was a fake one and it's not a good email. These situations exist because people are scared. People are scared of the internet. People are scared of what happens. They're scared of the bad emails. They're scared of losing their privacy. People feel like there's ever watching eyes. The internet's a very invasive thing. We can figure out where people are 24/7. It's a new world in just a matter of decades. It's like 2 decades, and we've gone from having internet, having the ability to download a few slow images sluggishly, to having the internet at our fingertips, to where we don't even know what positions need to exist to make this a more secure world. So people don't know how to make the world a more secure world for the future with what's going on right now. And that's why you need to watch this video, and this is what you need to know, is this is something that humanity has never seen in the history of anything. We have never had anything expand as rapidly as the internet in the history of mankind. And it really is a scary thing. With all of that being said, that wraps up my point of the day. And what I want to leave you all with is that if you do decide to get into cybersecurity, then you are the modern pioneers of our day. People who work on the internet and work in this new frontier, and the ones who are going out there and trying to define what in the world are we going to do with all of this. You're the pioneers. So, if this is something that you want, if this is something that you're looking for, you can get out there and you can start today. You can start applying to different types of jobs. I'll be making more videos. And for those of you who are new to my channel, subscribe if you like my content. I do also have a sponsorship from a company that is also my company. It's called NotiaPoint, and I will be trying to provide other free items from NotiaPoint, from that team, so that you guys can benefit from that as well, so that we have more offerings on the channel. So one of the things that I did create is I created a qualifications guide, a cybersecurity qualifications guide, to teach you how you can actually figure out what type of job you might be qualified for today. And this guide also has a small chart for creating a mock imitation 5-year plan for your career if you want to get into cybersecurity. So you can go ahead and download that in the description below if that's something that you're interested in. And keep asking the questions that you guys ask. I hope this was helpful. Once again, first principle thinking: what brought us to where we are? What is the industry? Why don't we know what's going on in this industry? The first principles. What's the root of everything? So that's what we talked about in this video. What is this industry? Now you know. Stay sharp.